This is Jennifer Huff, just arriving back from Orlando, Florida. And today we are talking about something that I've been seeing a lot of, given everything that's happening in the world right now. And that is kind of the old stuff, the old repeated patterns. There's so much polarity and stress in the world right now. What I'm noticing is stuff that's in the deepest, darkest corners of people's psyche is coming up. And I even noticed it in my own nervous system. And I thought, this is a thing, especially to talk about right now. The way it's showing up, and see if this is true for you. The way it's been showing up that I've noticed is it's showing up as a little bit of edginess. I'm noticing it in traffic and the way people are driving. I've noticed in sometimes the shortness of people's responses. Conversely, let's just be clear. I also see some people being even more kind than they've ever been. What have you noticed? What have you noticed in yourself? What have you noticed in other people in these times of great change where all of the cards are in the air? Welcome to the Thriving Life Podcast. I'm Jennifer Huff. I'm on a mission to empower you with the knowledge, experiences, and tools to turn your dreams into reality. If you're ready for permanent shifts in your ability to stay unstuck, make glass ceilings your new floors, and want practical tools rooted in applied physics and neuroplasticity to live a life of fulfillment, this podcast is for you. Let's get thriving forward. I don't watch the news anymore because I just want to make sure that my nervous system feels big enough to be able to dance with life without being taken out by what I'm witnessing and what I'm seeing or any fears that I have. Now is a time for transcending. If there ever was a time to transcend the baggage that you have, now is the time. And the deepest ones, the oldest ones are going to come up to be addressed in whatever way you are called to do it. But today we're going to talk about the tools and skills that I have donned and assist our clients with and use myself, quite frankly, which I've used over the last few days because I got food poisoning. What is coming up for you? What patterns do you see playing over and over for yourself? Or maybe what do you see in the tensions or because of the tensions and stresses that others are feeling? What are you witnessing around you? How are you coping with everything that's coming up? What is it when we feel, what is actually happening when we get disrupted from our flow? What is actually going on when life stops working and we feel pulled out by a reaction to what's in front of us? For instance, yesterday, because I had a little bit of, this is a perfect example of what's happening in the world. When I had I was just getting over food poisoning. What I noticed was I was going to a hyperbaric chamber and I was going to get an IV to get myself feeling better. In the idea of biohacking, there are so many things we can do that are so great for our health in order to transcend some of these things. So I really felt very called. And there was a place open till 4:00 yesterday that I could go to. And I went and I knew that I wanted to be home to remotely watch the Super Bowl with my sweetie. I was there and I realized that I didn't have the key to the condo I was in. And I remember getting out of the Uber and thinking to myself, because my body was still a little bit on edge from having a physical thing go wrong with it. So I want you to know there are certainly psycho-spiritual things that can go wrong, emotional things that are sort of in the background bothering us, like sometimes the weight of the world and looking at what's happening in politics and how divided families are. Those can cause some definite underlying psycho-spiritual and psycho-emotional things. And for me, it was physical yesterday. And what happened was I noticed a pattern of reactivity and a real craving for, I got to get in the condo and I just want to go home and relax. There was a knee jerk reaction. I had a friend with me in the car, and normally she sees me as someone that's so grounded, and then normally I am. But I had food poisoning. And I think it shocked her a little bit to notice how much I needed to get in the condo. I just needed to sit and be somewhere home with nobody else around. And so I noticed a pattern of being really attached. I haven't felt that way in years, probably. And that's what happens. That's what happens when there's a background of perturbation. If you haven't heard of the word perturbation before, it comes from the word perturb. It's like perturbing your nervous system. It's like adding so much weight to your nerves through the changes and shifts that are going on around you, or the unexpected happening, or life not meeting your expectations. And because of all those things, we our nervous system that wants to stay safe and in control starts to have its eye twitch and feels overloaded. And when our nervous system feels overloaded, if you haven't done a lot of work on your spiritual well being, your emotional well being, on the patterns that have been running you, you're going to have a knee jerk reaction to life, a knee jerk reaction to these things that feel out of your control or unsafe. Now, in the work that I do with myself, on myself, and with our clients, I'm not that interested in providing tools are great and skills are great and ways of snapping out of it are great. And we will share some of those and the things that I use. I'll tell you exactly what I did yesterday because I just love efficiency. Is how do I change the entire paradigm with which I plug into life? How do I change the overview of how I plug into life such that nothing would even occur as stressful? I'm going to talk about some paradigm shifts today that maybe you've never even thought of that would actually grow you so much bigger than the current world circumstances. What used to stress you, just because you dawn a different, greater perspective, may not get you as much. If you're willing, when we're really anxious or when we've had a past of a lot of volatility, what happens is the first step. The first step is you might hear these huge paradigm shifts that I'll talk about, but you may not be willing to go there. So the steps for actually changing your entire paradigm so you're free, really, truly free, the steps are: one, first, you have to have someone open the door to a possibility of another way of living your life. Two, once the door is open, then you have to get practice being that way, which means that you have to be able to disrupt the neurosynaptic highway, the well paved path of thoughts that usually you have when life gets really stressful. You have to be able to interrupt that. And three is you have to be at some point, there's going to come a leaping off where you're just going to have the courage to permanently make a choice to either believe that life is that way or not. As in, there's no going back. I call that a spiral jump. You're no longer trying to get better on the same spiral, but you're actually looking for an entirely different way. First, you have to practice it so that you gain confidence, though. So, just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up that our company and me as a human being, I am just so not about learning how to manage my levels of stress. There are lots of people that do that. I would rather change the entire paradigm with which I view life such that the stress no longer affects me, which is a deeper journey, but it makes a permanent, non regressive shift in the way that your life goes. So, some people, so this thing that happened yesterday, is not something that is repetitive for me. I also want to address today that idea of these repetitive patterns. Yesterday was unique only because I had food poisoning. So for me, what I did is I did use one of the tools. The tools that I used, first, what I did was in the situation where I was reactive and realized I didn't have a key to get into the condo, I took 3 deep breaths. The first question I always ask in the first breath, is this actually the worst case scenario? Am I going to die? And as soon as I answer that question, there are so many people and situations that are so much worse than what I was experiencing. I just come from taking care of my health. Someone just drove me back to this beautiful condo, like, please. So I had to take a breath to get into what's real. So the second breath I ask, is it real that I'm in an emergency? And instantly the answer is no, I'm not in an emergency. You just call the front desk and they send over security, which they did in like 3 minutes flat. And then number 3 breath is a breath. So I love these questions because it just gets me right back in my flow state. So the third question is is it are there people that have overcome this before aside from me? Is it even possible? I just love to ask the question, are there people that have clearly overcome this besides me? And the answer inevitably is always yes. Other people have totally moved through this without perceiving it as a disaster or anything like that. Regardless of my body so wanting peace and to lie down and to do all those things. It's, yeah, far worse than this. One of the reasons why we keep replaying the same narratives, but you might have some acute situation, some repeated triggers for you. And I'd love to hear about that. What are some of the triggers that just get you? And the reason I ask this is because in these days of great change, I'm going to tell you that those things that get you, right? Those things in these times of great change have to be, they don't have to. I'm not the boss of you. But man, would it serve for them to become incredibly minor. So, how do we make that which triggers the repetitive patterns so minor that you have enough cushion in your nervous system and in your glands and organs to be able to be than what's going on around you, to know that you are bigger no matter what happens. And I do mean no matter what, because I know some of you are truly concerned about what's going on in the world. And some of you who are not concerned, you're probably completely unplugged, but you hear things from people. And some of you, it's really getting to a place where we gain a perspective that's so much bigger than the current one we hold, so that we remain productive citizens, so that we may remain present in our wisdom. That is the goal here, to be so present in our wisdom that there's no way that we could be taken out. And it's just an interesting time to be alive, my friends. So, how do we do that? How do we get out of these? I used to have a repeating pattern with my dad where I would shrink when I knew his expectations weren't being met. And that's not his doing. I would just shrink. I would just it was a knee jerk reaction. That was a repetitive pattern for a long time in my life. Not at all now. I'm just completely in love with my dad. He's the same guy. It was me who changed. So here's the thing. Even if I look at one of our listeners saying people not being considerate or being oblivious to others, I see that all the time. These days, I see it a lot because people's nervous systems are so overwhelmed that they're not present. So even in the airport that I was just in, people were standing in the middle of the lanes or just stopping and putting their bags down to look for something right in the middle of just absolutely, completely not knowing that anyone else was around. The thing is, you can't do anything about other people's ability to navigate what's going on in the world and their nervous system being overflowed. But you can do something about the way you perceive their mm, because I promise you, those people aren't thinking, I wonder how I can be inconsiderate to you or oblivious today. I wonder how I can really exert my sovereignty by being an inconsiderate little dickhead today. And the thing is, that's not what people are doing. What they're doing is they're doing their best. And I want you to know that when people are not in their presence with wisdom, we've all done it. Really. There, but for the grace of God go we, because we've had those moments too, right? The key here is if you've got to decide whether you're going to be right or you're going to be a bridge builder. Those are the only options. You've got to decide whether you're going to be right or whether you're going to be a bridge builder. By the way, this is one of the skills to hone. That choice when you get triggered of whether you're going to be right, that someone is inconsiderate, which they're not being. They're just not being present in their wisdom. You're letting everything overwhelm you, then you might not be in your presence with wisdom, right? They really are doing their best, you guys. So let's do 3 deep breaths again. So this 3 deep breath technique is really great because you include a question with every breath. So the question is, did this person wake up trying to be, and like, were they seeking to be outside of my expectations? No, they were not. So that'll be your first breath. The second breath is, do I know what it feels like to feel so overwhelmed that I can't be present? So that would be the second breath, Teresa. And then the third breath would be just a breath of compassion for what it feels like to be there. Because if you can have compassion for that person, it's like Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian mystic technique to actually join your heart with another and understand that which you're witnessing is also within you. And if you can have compassion within yourself, then you've already started the pathway to healing. Yeah. It just takes a lot of compassion these days. So I had to have a lot of compassion for myself yesterday, by the way. So these 3 deep breaths, really great. You include the questions that actually just take you to the deeper truth instead of the knee-jerk reaction of your, you know, your fears, your safety concerns, your control concerns. But I do want to talk about that quantum leap. I do want to talk about how to quantum leap your perspective. Because can you see how, with what's going on in the world right now, global safety is a concern? The neighborliness of entire countries in many places in the world right now is up for question. Gosh, uh, we can see that there is a huge divide in the economic status of different people. There are the difference between the haves and have-nots is just getting massive. And so if you carry the weight of that, it can weigh on your nervous system. If you are someone who has spent your life feeling like you want to control your life, you want to control your circumstances, you want to get to a place where you feel safe, there are far more variables to try to manage. And they're much bigger than anything that you have direct influence over. So then we got to go to, what do you have direct influence over? And what you have direct influence over is you have direct influence over your town, your family, your body, your perspective. And that perspective, going from reaction or yelling at someone to actually breathing and being kind, which I experienced very much on my plane ride today. I had a very compassionate discussion with the guy next to me. who was having a real hard time. It's like in my TED Talk, in the TED Talk that I did, the movement of one to many, that movement is all about it's just making a decision. So the greater perspective is, do you see yourselves as a big question you can ask for yourself? Really look. Are you, in the bigger sense of the perspective of life, more committed to being a bridge? And you're going to have to answer the question for yourself. More committed to being a bridge for the world that you want? Or are you more committed to protecting yourself from what's going on? The thing is, that doesn't add anything to the way the world evolves. What it does is it keeps the status quo, keeps you in fear and everybody else in fear. It doesn't add anything to anyone else. It's okay. It's all right. There's no judgment from me, and maybe other people judge, but I just really don't judge that. I understand it completely. I have a lot of compassion for it. But at some point, it's really time to decide whether you're going to actually add to the polarity, right? Or whether you're going to actually be a bridge. Now, once you answer that question, now the second question comes to mind. Where am I going to go to make myself big enough? Last exercise we're going to do before we say goodbye from this particular conversation. Speaking of changing perceptions, of growing ourselves, just imagine right now that you take your consciousness behind your eyes. Okay. You don't put it out, your consciousness out in the world, but take your consciousness behind your eyes. Maybe you close your eyes and allow yourself to imagine that your essence, your spirit, your greater self, your deeper knowing is much bigger than your body. And then it's bigger than your house or apartment. And then it's bigger than the state or province or region you're in. And then it's bigger than the country you're in, and then it's bigger than the world that you're in. Grow your consciousness much bigger. Pretend you're an astronaut out in space looking back at the big blue marble. Take yourself out to the moon, and then even beyond the sun to view the entire solar system. And look back at how beautiful it all is, because it is on one level. And what I want to say from here is this: that if you can grow yourself bigger and include all other potential futures, meaning in the laws of physics, every future outcome is possible. They're all on different timelines. And from here, you can see all the different timelines that can play out, and that you can embody any of them. And that you contain not only from this greater self, but within you, within your 75 trillion cells times 100 million atoms per cell, the protons at the middle of each of those atoms contain basically a hologram of existence itself. So imagine that within you is every possibility. And by staying present in your wisdom and growing yourself bigger than the circumstances, you can make choices instead of being a victim of it, to be someone that's more concerned about being present in your wisdom. And as many times a day as you can, take a break and take those 3 breaths and bring yourself back to the idea that you are a microcosm of the macrocosm, and what you do every day actually does matter. And just breathe and know that I am not a victim, you are not a victim. And from that place, our actions to the people we love around us every day allow us to actually fractally, metaphysically, psychospiritually, and in every way change the world. And you are not alone. So that's how we get out of patterns. That's how big you are. It's a big I am. Can't wait to see you on the flip side. See you next time. Stay tuned. We're going to be announcing our upcoming Quantum Leap workshop and also a wonderful free intensive that we're doing for all of you. So stay tuned. All right, guys, have a great rest of your day. Hey, I deeply appreciate you joining me on the Thriving Life podcast. In these times of great change, it's so good to come together. I'm on a mission to empower you with the knowledge, experiences, and tools to turn your dreams into reality. Your dreams matter. Your thoughts and suggestions really matter to me, so please join me on LinkedIn at Jennifer Huff or on Instagram at The Wide Awakening. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy today's show, please leave a review or many reviews. Share the love. It really helps us to reach more people, and that is what a movement is all about. Until next time, keep thriving.